Hello, hello, hello. All right. So thanks for taking out time on weekend and coming to my talk on how we do security reviews at Slack. So if there are like two things that I want you to walk out with, those two things out of this talk would be how Slack is running security reviews and how Slack uses Slack in order to manage the workflow around security reviews. So I'll be covering total 5 topics here. The first one is we would understand what exactly security review is and why it is super important. And then we would deep dive into different phases of security review process. And the third one is we have developed a Slack application we call SDL bot or security review bot, which help us manage the intake process for the security reviews. And it also helps us to do the risk profiling of the different projects that we get asked for. Then we'll have the demo on SDL bot working. And finally, future improvements that we want to bring up in our process and our tooling. Quick introduction about myself. My name is Atulkumar Gaikwad, pronouns he, him. I'm part of Slack's product security team, and I have been associated with Slack company for past 1.5 years. I'm based out of California, and this is my first time at CornCon, so I'm very excited. Thank you. All right. So let's first understand what security review process is. So it's a process that we follow at Slack that provides security involvement from the Slack's product security team. It helps our Slack developers to build secure applications and softwares to help reduce the number of issues and also the severity of those issues, ultimately reducing the development cost later on. So if you find bug early in the phase of security review process, we don't have to spend too much time and effort later on fixing that particular issue. So we always recommend to go with the security review process to find the issues early in the SDL phase. A quick note about this process is we would only cover the product-related changes. The infrastructure-related changes are reviewed by our another sister team, security operations, and they have their own channel and workflow to manage those concerns. So why do we need it? So first off, we want to identify security flaws before the launch, as I said. But also, we have compliance requirements that all the new features and products would have gone through the risk assessment process before they go live. And we want to keep our compliance team happy, and also at the same time, we want to keep malicious hackers, we want to make them sad. So brief introduction about what exactly Slack is. So Slack is an immense tool used by large organizations, and it holds a lot of sensitive data. If Slack wasn't a secure messaging platform, we couldn't be expected to be trusted by our customers. And Slack has so many different variety of features. So if, just for an example, Slack Connect is basically a Slack feature which takes out the siloed email thread conversations and put it in the secure messaging platforms like Slack. And it helps you to work alongside with your partners, vendors, and customers by connecting with them over the Slack platform. What could go wrong with this type of a feature? Well, if you have, let's say, a disgruntled employee, or if you get harassed by someone you are connected with on a Slack Connect channel, then those are the worst case scenarios that we should plan for and mitigate before we actually make this product or this particular feature available for general public. Security reviews at Slack. So because we are such a fast and disruptive nature of business that we run, at Slack we have created our own SDL process to manage security reviews at scale. So the core components of this process are, one, we trust our engineers and we want to set them up for success. The second is we want to enable them to be security self-sufficient, and that doesn't mean they have to be expert in security engineering. We wanted to create a asynchronous process that could manage that could minimize the interruptions for both developers and as well as for the product security team. And then we wanted to provide a dedicated channel and opportunities for our engineers to consult with security and ask for help if they need anything. So now let's talk about what are the different phases in the security review process, what it really encompasses. So our process is split into 3 distinct parts. The first one is the security kickoff meeting, which is followed by the design review phase. In this phase, we basically perform 2 types of activities. One is threat modeling session with developers, and then the tech spec review or technical specification review. And the last but not the least is the code review part, where we perform, again, 2 types of activities. One is secure code review and manual penetration testing. So the first phase begins with security review, and this phase starts when development team completes their technical specification document, and they make a request using a SDL bot that we're going to talk about in a few slides. Once this SDL bot is triggered, or when the form is submitted using this SDL bot, product security team gets a notification, and then we assign 2 product security members, one primary and another one secondary for each project. So primary contact responsibilities are making sure that there is a security review process involved at different phases in the life cycle of the security project. And then the secondary person provides extra pair of eyes and support as needed. We plan for around 30 minutes of security kickoff meeting with key stakeholders from the development teams like front and back end engineers, product managers, engineering managers. And the goal of this meeting is to sit down with the team and get an overview of project, outline the security requirements and the timelines for the project delivery. Once we are done with the security kickoff meeting, then comes the design review phase. In this phase, we first review the technical specification document that team has created and give a high-level feedback on implementation plans. We document our opinion about the project in a Word template, the one you can see on the screen, which includes things like our initial thoughts about the project, what are the worst things that could go wrong with the project, the questions and suggestions we may have for the development team. Along with tech spec review, we also perform threat modeling exercise, which is my favorite one. In this exercise, we work with the team of developers and product manager and ask them what can go wrong, what would keep them awake in the night right after the release of the product. And then we ensure that we have proper mitigations in place. If we don't, then we would probably block them from releasing if the issue is a high-risk issue. During the actual threat modeling session, we do quick introduction to threat modeling to our developers. And then we take a copious notes about what exactly the feature is. Then we provide feedback to them on how they can make their feature more secure. We give each of these threats that we identify during the threat modeling session a risk score, and we file it against their corresponding JIRA ticket, which is our bug tracking tool. So what you see on the screen is basically a threat modeling document. It's a living document maintained for a particular product or a feature. And we do visit this document from time to time for any future changes in the scope of the project or any future enhancement. As you see on the screen, we document exact threat on the top along with the summary, and then its corresponding STRIDE category. So STRIDE is the threat modeling method that we have adopted at Slack. And then we have fields like risk rating, the current mitigation plan, the future mitigation plan, if we are planning to add more guardrails around the risk in future. All right, so now we are entering the third phase and the last phase. So once the project is approaching code complete, we begin reviewing implementation and wear a hat of attacker, try to see what might break, making use of our penetration testing skills. If we find anything concerning, we work with the team to fix those critical issues before the launch. Now, one thing to note in this phase is we do have SAST tools to identify low-hanging fruits quickly. But to the most part, the whole process is pretty manual. And we check for things like possible entry points for the code injection, insufficient input validation, the business logic flaws, which are not typically covered by automated testing. As we understand, like security review is a long process, and it might span over like a couple of weeks, sometimes even quarters, depending on how big that particular project is. We've tried to put everything in one single document. We call it as security review document or STL document. And this document would have the links to your threat modeling document that you had created, your tech spec review document that you had created, and it also covers the history of things that we discussed with developers in various different sessions. It also has the question answers that we exchange with our developers on the Slack channel, and the risks that we identify and notes about what could change in the future. All right, so this is all great. This all sounds well, good. But one obvious question that many of us would have is like, do we need to follow all the different phases and perform all these tasks like tech spec review, threat modeling, pen test, code review for each and every project? Because it seems impossible to do that, and it's not scalable approach. So yeah, that's right, because we want minimal level of security for a low-risk project, but we want a high or thorough investigation for the high-risk projects. And one size doesn't fit all. So therefore, we categorize projects into like 3 different categories: high, medium, and low. Security-sensitive components such as authentication, authorization, handling of PII or customer data, or any strategic Slack initiative would fall under the high-risk bucket. Then we have the second category of projects, which are like there is no direct access to user-generated content. Things are significant, but not like security-related. Those would go in medium risk bucket. And then we have the third category of projects, which are like minor changes, some UI updates, or some internal service which is not exposed to the end customer. We put them in the low-risk bucket category. All right, so what you see on the screen right now is the overview of the flow of security review project, depending on the risk level. So high, medium risk security review projects would go through all the steps of the security review process, if necessary. But if you notice the path 2, for the low-risk projects, we get the self-service checklist. And once developers fill out that self-serve checklist, they are good to go. For high, medium risk projects, if you find any high-risk finding, then we would block the release until the risk is mitigated. And another thing that you might be wondering, like, how do we make these prioritization decisions consistent and automated as much as possible? So the answer to all this question is like we have our ProdSec friend SDL bot, which we're going to see in a couple of minutes. All right, so let's first understand what are the benefits that SDL bot offers. So before we start talking about that, one of the challenges that we faced in the early phases was how do we improve the security review intake process to make it more engaging, but at the same time self-serve for our developers. So to solve this, we created this bot which gets triggered when Slack developers would type /SDL command from any Slack channel within their workspace. And what exactly this app does is it would help our engineers kick off the SDL process. It's easy to use, and it's completely self-service. It collects some basic information about the project to perform the risk assessment, and then 2 things would be generated out of this. So the first one is the security checklist in the form of a QUIP document. And the second one is a JIRA ticket to track the progress of the security review. SDL bot also help us to risk profile our projects. So when user fills out the initial information about the project, they will be directed through a bunch of different questions, as shown on the slide, to calculate the risk of the project. So depending on the risk derived, high, medium, and low, product security team may perform full or partial security review, as we have seen in the previous slides. Another thing to note here is SDL bot helps us create the risk profile of our projects, but product security engineers can override this risk provided by the bot, which gives us the flexibility if we come across an edge case which is not captured by any of these 3 buckets. All right, so now let's take a look at how exactly SDL bot works. Oops, I might have to go. All right. So what you see on the screen is the test workspace that I have created in the Slack. And the first thing that I'm going to do is create a channel for our developers, and I'm going to call it CornCon demo. I'm going to create, skip for now, and here is the channel that's created. The developers don't have to create another channel if they don't want to. Each team would have its own channel, and you can still engage with SDL bot by typing /SDL command here, and I'm going to hit enter. And here comes the brief summary about where they can ask for more help if they want, and we have pinned down all the important documentations in the first page itself. So I'm going to hit this green button. Let's go. Here we are going to ask them more information about the project. So the first thing that we ask is project name. I'm going to call it CornCon presentation. And as I said, like, we use JIRA as our bug tracking system. So I'm going to put the JIRA epic here, some dummy epic that I have already created. Then link to the technical specification document. I'm just going to put concon.net, the project channel, and this project channel could be the same channel from where the SDL bot was generated, or it could be there any other team channel as well. I'm just going to go with the same one. Here we ask for the GitHub link, so let's put that here. And a brief summary about what exactly feature that they are working on, followed by the launch date. So let's say the feature is about to launch by the end of this month, and if they have any question or concern, they can put in here. So they can say, we need security review ASAP, and hit next. Oops. Oh, all right. So this is a mandatory field. I'm just gonna hit next. All right. So on the next screen now, we are doing the risk prioritization, and the very first question that we ask our developers is, do you need direct security involvement throughout the project? If they enter yes or click on yes, then that project would be considered as high-risk project. But for the demo reasons, I'm going to click on no, because I want to show all the possible questions that we ask our developers. The second question is, does this component make major changes or implement new architecture, new authentication or security controls? I'm going to click no. Then comes, is this project highly important strategically? I'm going to say no. Is the target for this project a prototype, internal only, or a full productionized public launch? I'm going to say it's just a prototype. We are just testing out things locally, internally. And then, as you can see on the top here, the SDL bot, depending on your responses, has already calculated the risk profile of this project, and it's low. But we also give developers chance to select the different components that they might be using in the development of this project. So the components such as, let's say they are using third-party libraries, they can select that. They're going to be logging the data. Let's select that. What else? So let's say they are using SQL as their data store. We would select this. They might be using cryptography libraries. We'll select that. And let's say they are working on creating an internal API endpoint, which is not exposed to the customer. They can select that as an option as well. Then they will hit submit button here. And here is the summary of what they just filled out. Hit submit. And then we wait for like 30 seconds to let the magic happen. Within those 30 seconds, this Slack bot is going to create a JIRA ticket. And it is also going to create this self-serve checklist, which is also custom according to the selections that they made while filling out this form. So as you can see here, on the same channel, we sent out a Slack message. And there are two hyperlinks. One is the checklist, and the other one is the JIRA ticket. I'm going to click on the checklist here. So checklist starts with the general guidance. These are the common things that we would ask. But if you scroll down to the bottom, if you notice, the components that they had selected got specific questions that they need to answer. So for example, third-party code, logging, SQL, cryptography, API, those are the options that they selected, and now they would need to answer those. This is a low-risk project, so answering those questions would be good enough, but let's assume that it's not a low risk, and we do want to do some thorough investigation about the feature. So going back to the Slack message, here is the JIRA ticket. So as soon as the JIRA ticket is created, our product security team gets the notification, and whoever is on call for the security review triage would take a look at this one. They will quickly go through the tech spec document and revalidate if it's really a low risk. We have the flexibility to bump it up if we want to. And if I scroll down, you would see 5 subtasks covering all the 3 phases of our security review process. So we have a ticket or a subtask for kickoff meeting. Then we have 2 subtasks for design review. One is tech spec review, and the other one is the threat model here. And then the last phase, which is manual review, has got 2 subtasks. One is code review and the manual pen test. Now, the on-call person might assign this ticket to themselves, or they might assign it to someone else in the team, whoever is available. For the demo, I'm just going to assign it to myself. And here is another magic. Once that ticket is assigned, we also sent out a next Slack message on developers channel telling them who exactly is working on their security project. And if we go back to the JIRA ticket, now let's say the team has already planned for the security kickoff meeting. They would move this ticket from triage to open. They would start talking to the developers. They would enter the design review phase. They might complete that as well, then enter the code review phase. They would complete it as well, and then finally mark this ticket as done. And if we go back to the Slack now, all those state changes are communicated on the same Slack channel for our developers, so they know what's going on with their security review ticket, which is very, very important. And one of the reasons why we ask for the JIRA Epic ID when they fill out the form is because We want to block that particular epic unless the security review ticket is marked as done, which is why we also ask for the epic. All right, now let's enter. I'm going to move this back. I recorded this one just in case my demo doesn't work. So the future improvements. So change is the only constant thing that we all know, and we want to make our process better day by day, quarter over quarter. And there are two levels of changes or improvements that we can make. The first one is at SDL process itself. So over the period of time, we have figured out like asynchronous threat modeling really helps to minimize the workload on product security team. And it also helps developers to quickly go and complete the security requirements. So there is a talk that I have linked here from Jivan Singh from Twilio. It was delivered this year's besides San Francisco conference. And I highly recommend watching that talk. It talks in depth about how asynchronous threat modeling could work in your organization. And then the last set of modifications that we want to make is in the SDL bot itself. So we want to send out survey to our developers who participated in the SDL process so that we can take that feedback and improve upon. The last thing, and the second one is like we want to switch from risk levels, which are like high, medium, low, to risk scoring system, which would give us like the granular visibility into what exactly the risk is. So we might come up with a risk scoring system on the scale of like, let's say 0 to 100 or 0 to 1000. And last but not the least is we want to send out reminders for our teams that haven't completed the security review checklist, which is the only thing that we expect them to follow in case if their project is low risk. With this here, that's pretty much it. I would like to thank my Slack team members, Greg, Angelisa, Nikki, and Larkin, for making this project successful. And thanks for listening patiently for my talk. Thank you. Now I can take some questions. Yes. So the question is like, what type of permission and combinations we might face while reviewing a particular security project. It depends on project to project. Like some projects might be handling the customer data, and for things like that, we normally loop in our privacy team to take a deep dive into it. Some projects might, let's say, if one project requires creating a separate AWS account, right? Then we would loop in our another sister team into that. When it comes to the product-related changes, again, like depending on what type of risk that product has, our response might differ. So high risk, as I said, would get a thorough investigation. We would do the threat modeling, tech spec review, code review, Pentest, and all of those things. Sometimes, let's say if it's a medium risk, and let's say developers like came to us very late in the game, they already have designed everything and they are ready to go. And at that point, like doing just a code review or a pen test would be good enough for them to go ahead. And we might have some follow-up items that we can follow up later once they actually release. Most of the time, like we go with the like release it for the beta customers first, then like release it to few other customers, and then before you make it for the general public usage. So at different phases, we might set different bars to meet. Hope that answers your question. Okay, cool. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It's really interesting. I'm also an outsider, and so I'm curious how, so your system seems really efficient and good to me, but I'm wondering across the entire industry how similar your process is compared to other companies, and if you're like, there's some of this is the bot, for example, is this an innovation that Slack's making, or like things like that, questions along that line. How does your process compare to industry standard?
Yeah, so some of the core components of this process, like Pentest code review, that are pretty standard, but the level of engagements that we have at Slack is different than the others. And very early in the phase, we have realized the importance of like doing the automation or empowering our developers and not be there to like just block the release. How can we be friend with them? So from all of that angle, we have created different SaaS tools that we release to them as well, and they can run by themselves to find or identify those security issues themselves without relying on our team. That helps both, right? Like developers can quickly get the feedback from us, and we are not bottlenecks. So it also helps us to scale. Normally, the product security ratio to the developers is pretty bad industry-wide, and we need to scale. So how do we scale? Is by making friends in development team. We are using this awesome tool, Slack, to help us do that.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other question? If you're interested in using the similar SDL bot, in case if you are a Slack customer, there is an open source version of this particular bot. It's under Slack HQ, GitHub.org. You can search by GoSDL. I don't think like it's as advanced as what I've shown you, but it would cover the basic things. The one that I had shown you is totally Slack customized. Like we have integration with Quip, JIRA, and our internal systems. But using the open source one, you can customize it. All right, 3 second silence. Thank you, everyone.